When thinking about what to speak about tonight, or any night, I am often reminded of the rabbinic maxim that is often quoted with regards to sermons: afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. I have always struggled with this maxim, to be honest. As I've found throughout my career, rarely is any person just one or the other. They may be comfortable at home, but anxious at work. They may be comfortable at both, but anxious about the state of the world. Or they may be comfortable with the state of the world, God help them, but anxious about so many other things. All this is a long way of saying comfort, like happiness, is not a perpetual state of being. Maybe then this maxim has more to do with the state of privilege. But as we know, privilege may also be a state of being. But it can also be a state that is in the eye of the beholder. So when I finish struggling with this initial maxim, I then find myself turning to another piece of sage advice I received early on in my career, which was, if I was the congregation, what kind of sermon would I want to hear tonight? And after answering one that is funny and one that is short, I began to chew over the idea of what would bring me meaning in this moment. And in reflecting upon this, I realized that first I wanted to take a moment and think about the amazing event we held here at Temple last night with the Cantors concert. I was asked afterwards, what was the purpose of the event? Of course, the simple explanation, was that it was created to raise money for the Cantor Wendy Shermitt Music Fund. But that is too simple an explanation. What last night was truly about was about celebrating the creativity and talent of our amazing cantors and musicians, and doing so in the presence of our larger Temple Israel and Omaha community. It was about music that both challenged us and also lifted our souls. It was about music that made us uncomfortable at times and comforted us at others. And most importantly, it was about the music that lifted our souls that so desperately, desperately needed to be lifted. But more on this in a moment. At the very beginning of this week's Torah portion, Parashat Re'eh, Moses says to the Israelites, Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing if you obey the commandments of the eternal your God that I enjoin upon you this day, and curse if you do not obey the commandments of the eternal your God. Moses then goes on to remind the Israelites of the many different mitzvot that have been enjoined upon them, including ones related to moral laws, as well as civil, criminal, and social laws. It is, my friends, an extensive list. And it all seems to be done in a rush. Moses wants to get in all the important lessons one last time, as he wants to make sure the Israelites both hear them and, more importantly, remember them. In a way, whenever I read this list coming from Moses, it reminds me often from Hamlet, when Polonius was giving his son Laertes a series of maxims as Laertes is about to leave Denmark on a ship for France, some of which are still recited to this very day. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thy own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not be false to any man. Now, having just dropped Emily off at her dorm on Wednesday for the first time for college, it truly made me appreciate the words of both Polonius and Moses even more so. And not just the substance of the words, but also the impact of the lessons. Like Moses, we are hoping that Emily has taken in all that we could offer her these past 19 years and will incorporate them into the life of the person she is still in the process of becoming. And that is where it really hit me. You can talk all you want about maxims and give sage advice, but those will never land as hard nor be as impactful as experiences. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, especially to a friend, sounds sage, but until a friend owes you and doesn't pay you back, this maxim doesn't quite have the same impact. And until one experiences trying to become someone else to please others and how it diminishes their own sense of self-worth, does the words of "to thine own self be true," do these words have the same impact? Which brings me back to the Cantor's concert. I have spent the past many months, far too many to be honest, navigating the words and the expressions of conflict and frustration. To be clear, I am not diminishing these words, nor the people who are expressing them from so many different perspectives. But what has happened is that it has really narrowed my view of what my rabbinate is at the moment. I got lost in the maxims and forgot to be present in the experiences. Last night, in a way, was a realignment, at least for me. For how long, I do not know, but it was a brief glimpse into what we can all be about. We are not just a diverse community, often at odds with each other. We are also a community interested and invested in celebrating both our common heritage and our creative endeavor. We have the capacity to lift up each other, even when we are struggling and even when our hearts are broken. It is not an either or. When Moses said, "Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala," see, this day I set before you blessing and curse, he wasn't laying out a black and white for the community. He was reminding of them of the maxim that when the days look their darkest, to try always to find a way to choose blessing. Blessing in lifting up community, blessing in celebrating community, blessing in lauding the accomplishments of our young people, even when they are moving on to greater journeys in their own lives. The blessing of sacred disagreements, and perhaps most importantly, the blessings of the very acts of creation that spring forth whenever we allow our creative minds and talents to roam free. I know this can be so incredibly hard to do when life seems so hard. Conflict seems inevitable, and the challenges are so incredibly overwhelming. But it is upon us to continue to choose blessing, for that is what will give us strength to keep moving ever forward. So tonight, even as we may be struggling, even as we may be afflicted, even if we are comfortable, no matter where we are, I implore you, this Shabbat and each day, let us all continue to keep working to choose blessing. Shabbat Shalom.